This UCLA-Minnesota game is going to be a defining moment in the DeShaun Foster era.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started today is kind of dissecting the meaning behind the UCLA-Minnesota matchup, right? Teams that haven't faced off in forever. The inaugural Big Ten matchup like it'll be for many of these new UCLA Big Ten opponents, and the latest being Minnesota coming to town, the Rose Bowl. A game preseason, I think many of us could have banked as, hey, that's one we're expecting UCLA to win this season at home against Minnesota, right? Like just kind of like the Indiana game, except Indiana's come out. They've been 6-0. They're 3-0 in Big Ten play, and they're one of the big surprises in a surprising year of college football. A little different story, though, for a Minnesota team that started 2-3. Close game against North Carolina team without Darius Taylor, their starting running back. A close game and a loss on the road against Michigan, which took a furious fourth quarter charge. But, you know, their coach will pump it up and say, oh, we had them on the ropes. Well, that was an onside kick. A little different on the ropes. And then they actually beat USC, which thank you very much, Golden Gophers. We will gladly applaud you anytime you go beat USC. But this is a game where UCLA is about a touchdown dog. And there's many different factors in this game, right? UCLA is coming off 4 straight ranked losses, 2 on the road, 2 at home. It was supposed to be a 3-game gauntlet, turned into a 4-game gauntlet. And as a touchdown dog at home, this is a game where, yeah, you might not be favored. But for DeShaun Foster, these are the games you got to bank at home, right? How many times do you see some of those top programs, even in down years where they're 8-4, they're an underdog at home and like a team that's expecting to win on the road after a big win? This is where UCLA, or one of those teams that's growing to a good program, they go and get that dub, and that's the build of a second half charge, right? Because not everybody's going to go 12-0 or 11-1 or 10-2 or 9-3. Heck, not even 8-4. But there are teams who start rough, like UCLA has, maybe not with the same schedule stretch the Bruins have had in a row, and then they start to figure it out in the second half. Well, UCLA is still not quite there at the midway point. This marks the 6th of a 12-game schedule. And you lose this game. This is where I said, hit the panic button, all right? For the year, I know it's 1 year. It would be halfway into the first year of the DeShaun Foster era. There's already like the flames, like the meme where the dog's just sitting there like, all right, and the cartoon meme like, oh, everything's fine. Everything might go in shambles. Okay. This is that panic meter game. If UCLA is 1-5, then that worst case scenario 1-11 season is on the table. I don't think so, but if UCLA looks really bad in this game, and Minnesota is as PJ Fleck, their head coach, called them the best 2-3 team in the country, now 3-3 with their first Big Ten win against USC, then all right. But come on, man, like, they're not really throwing the ball around. They've got Darius Taylor, who has been stopped by more physical defenses. He's a good running back. But UCLA's faced physical fronts, good running backs, solid rushing teams. They faced 2 of the top 10. They faced 4 in the top 25. Like, come on now. What hasn't UCLA seen at this point that Minnesota's going to throw at them that the Bruins should not be able to handle at home? Like, come on. Another thing I think we're going to learn about, too, is who really should be the starting quarterback. Take out my opinion, take out your opinion. Garbers, if healthy, is going to start, right? If he is deemed healthy enough, because he's not going to be 100%, that ankle, that right foot's going to be taped significantly. His mobility probably won't be 100% and be the same like a 6'4" Justin Martin. But we will learn by the end of this game who is the true starting quarterback. If Garbers comes out, he has a good game, the Bruins win. There is no question. Justin Martin just has to wait. All right. It might be soon if Garbers isn't behind a sturdy offensive line. But if he is, or a decent one, and the game plan is to get the ball out quick, he makes solid decisions. Okay. So I think this game is important from a perception standpoint from the fan base. UCLA is not the fan. We haven't seen UCLA win at home this year. We haven't. Those are just the facts. The last couple UCLA home games have been losses to Cal, ugly, losses to Arizona State, a blowout loss to Indiana this year, and then a blowout loss to Oregon. Those are your last 4 home games from last year dating into this year, all right, from the Chip Kelly era into the DeShaun Foster era. Some of those games aren't like the other, but still, those are games UCLA has not kept within a single score. That's 4 straight L's where we're dipping. Yeah, the Arizona State game was close late, but that was the game they were favored. Arizona State was going swinging gate. Now it's a different era, different regime, different circumstance. But, these Bruins fans are antsy, and they're not getting tickets. They're not going. We're not going to the Rose Bowl. And I want the perception to change, but it all starts with a win and some good vibes and some good feelings, all right? Obviously, you can go look. See, tickets are cheap for the Minnesota game. But all these Big Ten road teams, they're going to come bring their big allotment of fans coming out here. And remember, UCLA still got to go to New Jersey, got to go to Nebraska, play a couple of Friday night games, and host a big-time rivalry game against USC at home later this year. So there's still more travel to do before the bye. This would be a nice win to bank and test out, once again, my third pillar, my third key thing in this first segment, the physicality of this team. They faced off against a Curt Cignetti, rough and tough Hoosier squad. All right, they went to LSU where they got dominated in the trenches. They couldn't rush the passer, a little depleted on the defensive line. In larger part, they couldn't keep Garbers upright. Then you face Oregon. You saw a brief moment of some success, but nothing to rush the passer. And then they finally sacked the quarterback, Drew Aller, against Penn State, who did not necessarily run the ball all over them, but they kept their quarterback upright to make a couple of throws. Now, I think Aller is better than Brosmer by a bit, the new quarterback from Minnesota this year, the transfer coming up to the Golden Gophers. So, again, what does the perception of the program look like after this game? The starting quarterback, and how physical is this UCLA team? They face more physical. I think they faced some of the most physical teams in the trenches, where obviously that is the weak spot for this UCLA team this year, and we will learn so much. Those are the things from this Minnesota game. So how does UCLA stop Minnesota? Let's talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Go check out that UCLA-Minnesota game on Game Time, right? That's the place to get your tickets for this game against the Golden Gophers in the Rose Bowl. It's a 6 p.m. kick. Use Game Time. You can check out the panoramic seat viewing to see where you're going to sit in the Rose Bowl. I'm assuming the tarps will still be up, but yet this is a game where the tickets are dipping. They're well within a reasonable price. And hey, Game Time also has the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go check it out, Game Time Picks, if you want to sit close to the action as well to help curate the best deals for not just football games, comedy, music, theater, and more, all on Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, create an account, download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Cruising on into the second segment for Locked On UCLA. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer with you guys. We're talking UCLA in Minnesota, a game where the Bruins are dogs at home. It's technically an upset. If a game's within like a touchdown, like who's favored, like there's a team that's favored, but an upset I would consider like beating a top 25 team, like an upset. All right. It is embarrassing that UCLA is going to be they won't be favored for a lot of these games. And Minnesota, unfortunately, is one of them. UCLA might not be favored until maybe Fresno State comes to town after the way they've played. And that was after their recent stretch. Indiana's been favored. Minnesota's been favored, both in the Rose Bowl. Some surprising things I would have not expected prior to week one, but were more than likely capable after week 1 to week 2. So let's look at a Minnesota team that just took down USC in front of a packed house in their home, ran the ball. They used their quarterback to rush the ball, but a large part of their attack starts offensively with Darius Taylor. He has 416 yards he's gained, 402 yards overall, 5.5 yards per game per carry, 5 touchdowns. He averaged 80 yards per game. A couple of those games he's had were terrible games against Iowa and Michigan. Very physical defensive fronts. And he did miss their season opening loss against North Carolina. So that's the one caveat to their loss to the Tar Heels. Still, that tells you if you stop the running back, I'm not sure they're going to lean so much on the quarterback, and the Bruins can force some turnovers. They literally had a pick in their hands taken away in the Penn State game, had a pick 6 against Oregon, were unable to do anything against Indiana, unable to truly do anything against LSU, but when the Bruins force turnovers or look better at it, they stay deeper in the game. Now let's look at some of these games so far for Darius Taylor, all right? Let's talk about some wins and some losses. Against Rhode Island, his first game of the year, he didn't have to do much, 14 carries, 64 yards, and a touchdown. Cool. He's also a receiving threat, had 48 yards out of the backfield. Then you look at Nevada, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dominant. That was on 11 carries and 37 yards in a score in the air. Iowa had 34 yards on the ground and then 13 yards as a receiver. Against Michigan, 36 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, so short yardage touchdowns, and then 52 yards in the air. All right, so that's combined 88 yards from scrimmage. 144 yards against USC, 56 yards in the air. So what you're going to have to do, I think, is keep Darius Taylor close to, if not under, 100 scrimmage yards, which for him is the combination between rushing and receiving, because he is a solid enough receiver to get close to 30-plus yards in the air. He was the leading receiver against USC and still put over 144 yards, a 40-yard long run, 25 carries as a workhorse back as he gets stronger as the season progresses from his leg injury. So you go back to that first segment. How strong and physical is this UCLA defense? They just got Cajo back, all right? They're learning how to live life without Keanu Williams, slowly rotating guys like Sharif Say on the D-line, rotating new guys in there. Hopefully Jay Tuia can make some plays. This is a game where I'd like to see some negative runs because Penn State, they could run the football. And they, yes, were also without their leading rusher, but their second back was not terrible at all. Like, let's be real. They got a two-headed monster over there at Penn State. So UCLA still faced a very solid rushing attack, and Drew Aller is not the least mobile guy on earth. So, I think what UCLA's faced is better passing attacks, better rushing attacks, and hopefully maybe the weakest offensive line they faced so far in the last few weeks, which is saying something because Indiana's been keeping their quarterback upright. LSU certainly does. UCLA snuck through for Penn State, and Oregon has one of the more dominant offensive lines since they figured out their first couple of week issues. Now the Bruins have to generate pressure, right? They have to do it, and they have to stop Darius Taylor. And don't forget, the guy who made the spectacular catch against USC, Daniel Jackson, all right? So let's take a look at their leading receiver, because Brosmer, their starting quarterback, only averages 200 yards through the air per game. Taking a look at this isn't a team that averages 30 points per game. They're not going to light up the scoreboard. If they do, this is a glaring look on the UCLA defense in Akaika Malloy. But Daniel Jackson, 362 yards and a touchdown. For Minnesota, you've got 7 different guys with a touchdown. No individual guy has more than one receiving touchdown this season. None. And their leading receiver averages 60 yards per game. Daniel Jackson, 32 catches, 362 yards. And their second leading receiver with receptions is Darius Taylor, a touchdown, 40 yards per game, 26 receptions. All right. So they get the ball out. They don't necessarily go deep. The longest passing play they've had this year was 44 yards to Nick Callerup, and he's got 3 receptions this year. Their second longest under 40 yards, that's to Daniel Jackson. All right. So he has about 11 yards per catch. So they're not necessarily going vertical. So this is a game for the DBs to not give so much cushion, I think. All right. If UCLA is going to sit back, play 5 yards off in the secondary, then Brosmer's going to hit that. They're going to give the ball to Taylor. They're going to play action, maybe go deep once or go with a little slant route that's going to get 15 yards when it should get 0-2. UCLA has to play up on these receivers because they aren't necessarily going vertical, And the numbers back it up that they have not just blown past receivers, all right? One of the FCS leading passers transferring to Minnesota, whose starting quarterback transferred to Rutgers after last year in Minnesota. UCLA on deep. A lot of this is defensive heavy so far to start. Handle the physicality of the top back. Play up on these receivers who have made some spectacular plays. Don't get me wrong. That Daniel Jackson catch, arguably one of the best catches you'll see in college football all year. If you haven't seen it, go watch the replay of what he did against Michigan in that fourth quarter near comeback victory for the Golden Gophers against the Wolverines. All right. So this is a team that likes to really ground and pound, be physical. They can score in a hurry and in bunches against a strong defense like they did in Michigan, but large in part they were kept quiet in that game. Had 2 fourth quarters where they've scored 2 or more touchdowns against Michigan and USC in back-to-back weeks. So the Bruins have to be ready for a late game explosion from the Golden Gophers. That is what they have shown the last few weeks against similar to maybe a little bit better opponents on the road and at home for Minnesota. All right. Now for the Bruins, how to beat Minnesota? Just don't turn it over. Miller Moss for USC threw 2 picks against this Minnesota defense. All right. And I know some of the play calling for Lincoln Riley has been questioned. Well, UCLA is just trying to run positive plays without their head cut off, literally offensively, and having their quarterback run for dear life. So if it is Garbers, like it seems like it's leaning, or if it is Martin, we know they can run a capable enough game plan that moves the ball down the field. It's from the 25-yard line in, the red zone plus, all right? No, this isn't like a streaming service, the red zone plus. From 25 yards in, when the Bruins cross midfield, when they're knocking on the door, to the edge of field goal range, to scoring in the end zone, the Bruins have to convert, all right? I'm not sure how many times they're going to go down the field successfully, like they did against Penn State deep twice, when the game was still semi in the balance in the second half and definitely in the balance early in the first quarter in their opening drive. Sometimes you got to take the points, and sometimes you got to convert and not rely on DeShaun Foster having to decide whether it's 4th and 1. Let's not get in those situations. What UCLA needs to do, of course, is if Garbers is starting, avoid the turnover. Avoid the turnover. Garbers has to make smarter decisions and not force things. And I know some of his picks have been because the Bruins are down late. He's forcing things, and he just needs to get the ball out of it in a hurry with the offensive line, the pocket literally crumbling in front of him. If it's Justin Martin, then I would say for Martin, for Eric Bieniemy, maybe open up the playbook a little bit and be more dynamic, whether it's letting the kid run, telling him, hey, if you have a lane to run the ball. You're a healthy quarterback. Go vertical. Their biggest play last week was a little swing pass on the wheel route over to TJ Harden, who burst up the sideline, and the Bruins could only settle for 3 points. But still, it was a vertical route. That was a beautiful throw, great catch, and changed the field and nearly got UCLA to tie the game late in the second quarter at Penn State. So if it's for Garbers, smarter decision-making. If it's for Martin, then it is open up the playbook and let the kid be a little bit more dynamic. Because obviously, I think he's got more to showcase. I'm not disappointed in what Martin did against Penn State. But for now, UCLA is going to go with Garbers, and I don't necessarily disagree. All right? Let the kid lose his job. He's already lost it like 2 or 3 times in his UCLA career. Let him play it out for now. Then, what can UCLA do? Well, they can't make stupid mistakes. If you play a clean football game at home, then I do think they'll have an opportunity, and they should have an opportunity to beat Minnesota. And again, it goes back to segment 1. You lose and you lose ugly. That is not a good sign because this is the first unranked opponent that is not currently ranked. Indiana went from unranked to ranked. That I don't think will be ranked next week at 4-3. The UCLA has a chance to finally get the check mark off of win number 2 this season with winnable games coming up. But if they lose this game, all those potential winnable games later in the season look like chores. Going to Rutgers, going to Nebraska, hosting an Iowa team that plays really good defense, isn't necessarily known for what they can do offensively under Kirk Ferentz. Hosting USC, which looks weaker and weaker by the week. Fresno State at home. They haven't beaten them in forever. All right? This can set the tone. Don't do stupid things. Manage the physicality and keep Minnesota's best players like Darius Taylor from touching the football or exploding. Force Brosmer to beat you, and not by 5-yard cuts like Dylan Gabriel did for Oregon just sitting there in the pocket, just slicing and dicing. Force him to make a throw with some tight coverage. All right? Let's do it. All right? Speaking of let's do it, let's talk some UCLA basketball next on Locked On UCLA. Hey, NFL fans, you're going to start the season off big with FanDuel, and a big return, America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. So when you get in the hunt in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. Once again, you place your first $5 bet, you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place that first $5 bet. Check out FanDuel.com. That's America's #1 sportsbook. Hey, do you think the UCLA Bruins are going to cover this week, right? Go check it out on FanDuel, right? If UCLA is going to win, go hammer it, all right? Or if you think it's going to be a 2-point game. Or, if you're not confident in UCLA, maybe it's the good old bet against UCLA rule, right? They go, let's hope for a win, bet against them. Maybe you hedge your bets in that way. I don't know, right? They go to FanDuel.com. Check it out. And if it's your first $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed on FanDuel.com. All right, here we go. Final segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Today, we're wrapping things up by talking basketball, all right? So I just talked with Isaac Shade. We're super excited. And yes, I'm high on this team, all right? There's so many newcomers. There's so many players. There's so much depth on this team. The more that I think about it, yes, I get more cocky and confident about a potential run deep into the tournament. Second, third weekend is where I've been going with things. And then wondering, obviously the travel is going to make a big difference, especially for basketball, because they got to go play 2 games in a road swing, go back and forth many more times than what the football team has done. Of course, they go to Hawaii, Louisiana, New Jersey, all these things, but basketball, got to go fly to New York, back. Indiana, in Illinois a couple of times, go to Indiana, go to the East Coast, I believe play Rutgers in Maryland, all right? I mean, the women's team, they got to go all the way out to France and all those things to start the season, but for the men's team specifically right now, they have the depth for Mick Cronin, I think, to withstand it. Now, that is a bunch of guys going on the planes, all maybe dealing with the soreness differently, the travel. But for Mick Cronin, he can trot out so many different lineups that I think this team can withstand the travel a lot better than other teams can, right? I'm not exactly sure how deep the Trojans are right now, or the Huskies or the Ducks. And yes, everybody's got to go deal with it. But when you're going coast to coast in college basketball, right, they're going back and forth, right? This isn't the NBA where they all do it. They still got to take classes. They still got to maintain some things. And they got to go back and forth for these games, where in the NBA, they're still staying generally in a region of sorts before they come back and forth. And yeah, they got crazy back-to-backs, although the NBA is really skirted away from that. And in college basketball, they don't go back-to-back. But the Bruins are going to be the traveling circus with lots of opportunities to go from. I think that 2 spot, as I told the Locked On College Basketball, the Locked On Tar Heels host Isaac Shea the other day, that 2 spot is going to be one of the most competitive spots in the country to get starting time in UCLA, right? You got Sky Clark. You've got Dominic Harris. You're battling with a couple of freshmen. Maybe Fernie plays the 2. Maybe Trent Perry gets the 2. All right? And then you can't forget about Sebastian Mack, last year's leading scorer for the majority of the season in the 23-24 campaign, all right? And now, ever since that way too early look to now the early look into this season, with the team practicing, preparing for that November 4th opening day against Rider, I'm thinking now, at this moment, I've got Dylan Andrews, I've got Sky Clark as the 2, Kobe Johnson as the 3, Bilodeau as the 4, and William Kyle III as the 5. That is my current starting lineup. And then you see the picture release. You see a Dimar looking stronger. Like, man, he's not exactly a twig anymore. There's so much depth on this team. I'm hoping the Bruins take advantage of the opportunity in front of them. A chance to surprise a lot of newer opponents, coaches who don't necessarily have a lot of experience coaching against one another, right? And then the Big Ten already had a bunch of coaching changes from USC to Washington, in addition to the Michigans, the Ohio States of the world, so many changing things. And then in college basketball, transfers, change rosters a lot more frequently and a lot more turnover than we've seen in years past. And Cronin tapped into that with the NIL potential. Now, I wonder how UCLA handles the travel. I think the depth is there, and this will be a very fun team to watch this season, all right? The first month, a little easy, I think, light on the challenges for UCLA. They didn't go on a big Thanksgiving run. They're not going for any Christmas Day tourneys with the early Big Ten schedule. They do get to play New Mexico in a neutral site game in Nevada. But I think the Bruins, that'll be a sneaky game against a Mountain West team in New Mexico playing in the state of Nevada. So I think they have an opportunity there. Now, it's how they build, how they gel. And if there's locker room chemistry issues, then all bets are off. But if they buy in, like how Cronin does his homework, and make sure that they do, this team will be very, very, very special, which is why we should get our hands up for an 8 clap and get excited, all right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Check out the less Locked On UCLA episodes. Download, subscribe. Thanks for support. Next episode will be more keys, more look, deep analysis for UCLA, Minnesota, some predictions. Check it out here on Locked On UCLA. Thanks for your support. This is Zach signing off. Go Bruins.